part of his design. But how we go about filling that appetite can very quickly turn ugly if we are not careful. Michael Jackson did not plan to die at such an early age and under such suspicious circumstances with so much sadness around him. John and Kate did not plan to end their marriage in front of the whole world watching on national television. So while our appetites motivate us to seek fulfillment, and although God wired us this way to seek Him for ultimate fulfillment, our appetite has to be managed or it will lead us into a world of tremendous pain and regret. When an appetite intended to help us survive is managed incorrectly, it may become a trap holding us in a deadly grip. And until we give ourselves and our appetites completely over to God, we'll remain trapped. So how do you know? How do you know when satisfying your appetite has moved from a healthy pursuit of the things God's given us to a dangerous trap heading to regret and pain? Well, to give you a hand with that, and this isn't something you have to do right now, we put a little self-evaluation inside your program today. You can find a couple of minutes alone to fill in a few questions. You may have a better sense of where you're at in that journey, of how you're doing with your appetites, with how you're doing with what God's wired you with. And I encourage you to take a few moments and do that today. The situation we find ourselves in today does not have to be the final word, though. Here's the beautiful part. God always gives us a choice. We're not robots. We can think and feel and choose as we please, and He delights in that. But He also warns us about this amazing human feature. He gives guidance about our appetites and our quest for fulfillment. He knows that when we settle for unhealthy and unfulfilling imitations of what we really desire, our appetites can begin to rage out of control and start controlling us, in fact. He knows about our tendency to turn to sources of satisfaction that will eventually turn on us and force us either to give up altogether or to overindulge until the bitter end. We find this guidance throughout the Bible for sure, but nowhere more firmly than what I call the Big Ten of Exodus 20. And we showed them up here during the offering time. We showed them in the New Living Translation and in text speak, whichever you're more comfortable with. These words are probably familiar to you because they form the basis of law for most democratic nations. Honestly, too, this is where a lot of folks get pretty freaked out about Christianity, the Big Ten. At first read, when you read Exodus 20, God sounds like an egomaniacal control freak who's a killjoy with so many prohibitions and rules, it'll just be too impossible to follow. We'll never please Him, so why even bother? Who wants to live like that anyway? I want to challenge you this morning to turn that around. With God's provision, with better understanding, we see that we can regain control of whatever's controlling us. God knows that just trying harder to control our appetite isn't going to work. God knows that what does work is surrendering our problems to Him. God knows that we can't control our appetites on our own. And here's the amazing revelation. God never expected you to. Today I want to focus on the first 6 verses of Exodus 20 of the Big Ten, the first 2, because they specifically give us some guidance about our appetites. And as I said, I think we may have just missed the language cues. So in the first one he says, I'm God. I rescued you from actual slavery. And this was a big deal because if you remember, at the time, Moses had just brought the people out of the land of Egypt where they were literally slaves, working from dawn until dusk. And they were rescued out of that. And one of the amazing things that happened when they were rescued is that they actually traveled through the sea. God parted the sea so that they could walk through. So they had the total sense of being delivered by God. They saw God in action. So I rescued you from actual slavery, he says. Since I've proven myself to you, don't put other gods ahead of me. I rescued you, slavery, don't put gods ahead of me. I've proven myself. This isn't God on an ego trip. It's God saying, trust me, I'm a sure thing. No matter how long you suffer, I'm there. And ultimately, I will deliver you out of the crap. That's the first commandment. Here's the second. Don't make up gods either from stuff that's all around you. Because if you let those appetites get out of control, it'll wreck your families and wreck your lives for generations. And I love you way too much to want to see that happen to you. So I'm giving you the secret of success here. All you have to do is let me be number one in your life. That's the second one. If you start to think about the 10 Commandments from a more permissive perspective, if you think about all the things that God wants you to have, you begin to see him less as that killjoy dictator. But one of my big questions for him someday will be about this very thing. Was there not some other way to write this stuff that would have made you seem like a friendlier God? Wouldn't things have been easier if you didn't come across as such an egomaniac? It'll be interesting to see what he says. These 10 Commandments are taught more simply in the latter half of the Bible. It's meant for new believers to find it easier to understand. It's narrowed down to 2, in fact. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Luke 10:27. When we try to satisfy our appetites in ways that dishonor God and hurt other people, God is pleased and people are hurt. Consequence. But when we satisfy our appetites by seeking God and seeking what's good for us, we're acting just as God designed us to, and he's pleased because more people discover him through watching how we live. Let's take a minute to look at the value that our God-given appetites have in our lives. Here they are. First of all, our appetites provide foundational motivation. They serve the basic purpose of motivating us to live life to the fullest. It's a good thing. Secondly, our appetites draw us together. If we didn't crave companionship, we wouldn't hunger for community. We wouldn't hunger for intimacy, sexuality, and ultimately procreation. That's good things. Our appetites sustain us physically. Food's necessary for energy and survival, and God made it possible for us to truly find pleasure as we enjoy the food he provides. Good thing. Our appetites lead us to pleasures that enrich and fulfill. Feelings of pleasure, whether physical or spiritual, they're gifts from God. 1 Timothy 6:17 is just one place where we find this. Put your trust in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Very good thing. Our appetites can stimulate a sense of adventure and push us outside our comfort zones. This can cause you to try out new things that are exciting, like traveling, taking jobs with multiple media appearances, or hiking the West Coast Trail in the face of being eaten by a bear or a cougar. Good things out of an appetite for the unknown. Our appetites draw us close to God, and he only wants us to come willingly. We are each designed to long relationship with him. Our desire for spiritual security leads us to seek God. And when we do, we find peace, joy, and love in abundance. And these are very, very good things. So our appetites are God-given, and they serve beneficial purposes in our life. Not one purpose, purposes. And we know that our appetites are best satisfied with the actual things we desire. But they're also met when we go through the pain of resolving our unmet needs. And to get to the root of this idea, I've got to head way back to the Garden of Eden. You can find that story in Genesis 3. I'd encourage you this afternoon or sometime when you have a few free minutes to read through this story. It's an amazing story. Adam and Eve are living peacefully in the garden. They know absolute joy and community with God. They get visited by him every day. There's that tree they know they shouldn't eat from, and God allows that tree to exist in the garden because he's got to be sure Adam and Eve are choosing to obey him willingly. And then Eve meets the serpent. She takes some fruit, she eats it, and she gives some to Adam. And at that moment, their desire to please themselves exceeds their desire to please God. And this is the exact moment when things go off the rail for all of humanity. From this moment on, our biggest struggle is the battle between flesh and spirit, people and God, self and others, right and wrong. And we fight this battle every single day.